Hey there guys, it's Pineapple. In this video we're going to keep it short and sweet. We're going to talk about which 7 quirks I think Shigaraki should steal from their users. Hit it! Alright, so when compiling this list, I thought about all the quirks that I think Shigaraki doesn't have, but absolutely should have, and kind of like how broken it would make him if he did have all these abilities, right? Or even just some of these abilities. We're going to go over them right now. So, number 1 we're going to start off with is Erasure. Now, Erasure, of course, is Shota Aizawa's quirk. It's pretty much the ability to look at someone and turn their quirk completely off, right? And you don't have to maintain like exact eye contact. I think Aizawa uses it in the Overhaul arc, right? And he uses it on a group of people, and then he leaves for a bit, and their quirks are still deactivated for a while Tamaki is talking to them. I think the main danger here would be losing sight of Shigaraki, right, within that time window. So that's kind of the main danger from Aizawa's side, but imagine if Shigaraki had this quirk. All of a sudden, anyone who is a threat to Shigaraki or who's going to be coming up against him to try to take him down, no matter what level of hero you are, from Endeavor to Star and Stripe to Deku, anybody, right? He gets to just look at you and turn off your quirk. And at that point, you're just effectively helpless against Shigaraki, right? I mean, he already All Might level, already has all these amazing quirks and then horrifying quirks also that he could use to try to take your quirk or get to you with his crazy speed and this and that. But with this, it's horror. He could just walk up to you slowly like Teen Gohan, right? And steal your quirk away and then erase you and make you like feel horrible that happened to you, because also he's gonna have the hair standing up, right? And we know Shigaraki lately, his hair has just been growing all over the place and going all crazy. So imagine it's standing up with his red eyes glowing, his already red eyes glowing, while he stares you down and you feel powerless and he takes your quirk and decays you. It just sounds raw. So for that reason, I definitely think Shigaraki should steal Erasure from Eraserhead. The second quirk that I think would be very useful for Shigaraki to steal from its user is gonna be Rabbit. Now hear me out. I know immediately, let's just get past the elephant in the room, which is gonna be, yeah, this would mean that Shigaraki would have big bunny ears, okay? But not necessarily, because we do see that All For One takes, like, you know, mutation quirk users quirks and all this stuff, and his body never changes. So maybe, like, as long as he's not literally using the quirk, or maybe All For One only takes, like, not the mutant aspect of the quirk, but the ability that comes from the mutation, right? Because I don't think we've ever seen All For One himself kind of mutate and stuff like that, besides, like, growing his body and deforming it in certain ways because of, you know, he's using certain quirks, right? So maybe it wouldn't give Shigaraki bunny ears, but let's just have fun with it, and let's say that Shigaraki stealing Rabbit from Mirko would give him bunny ears, but at the very least, that would make him further parallel one of the characters from Horikoshi's last manga, the Zoo manga, right? That would make him parallel Sheena, right? Which is the white-haired rabbit who, when the moon hits, he turns into a human and looks, I mean, pretty much like Shigaraki already. And to a certain extent, they have a very similar sort of motivation, right? And there's definitely a lot of parallels you could draw between the two of them. They wear all black, I mean, scarf, everything. I mean, we can get into that later. Maybe I could do a video about those two specifically, because that is where my banner even on Twitter comes from. It's supposed to be both of them together. But if Shigaraki were to steal Mirko's Rabbit quirk, apart from it making him more like Sheena from the Zoo manga, it would mean that Shigaraki would have a body that is much better adapted, I feel like, and much more coordinated with his ridiculous speed and strength, right? Because we know Shigaraki is extremely fast, he's extremely agile, he's a little feral-like, right? We've heard that he's very feline-like from Aizawa and various other characters in the series, I believe, or at least that's how he's been described. I don't think it was Aizawa, it was definitely like a Meta Liberation Army member. But regardless, Shigaraki, he kind of uses his body a little awkwardly, right? He kind of like uses his newfound strength and speed a little awkwardly. I feel like by stealing Rabbit, I'm not expecting some sort of massive boost in power or speed, because he already should have that thanks to having an All Might-like body. Although if you take Rabbit and apply it to an All Might-like body, I wonder how it scales, right? Like if it would still scale ridiculously and he would then get a further power up. But I just assume it would make him move a lot more like Mirko, right? Move a lot more like, not just of speed, but with like agility and acrobatics, right? And I feel like Shigaraki being able to effectively run on 4 hands and doing all this kind of stuff real quick, or bunny hopping and having crazy kicks, would just really add to his kit, especially when you're in situations where you have to do close combat combat with somebody, right? Where you're gonna be fighting someone who you're not gonna instantly be able to touch with your hands. So doing all sorts of kicks, and it's kind of the same Deku problem, right? Where Deku was using his hands too much, and it'd be awesome if he could start doing kicks. That's a situation that I believe Shigaraki could be in, like he is in right now, right? So the ability to just do crazy, just wild kicks, right? And how Rabbit would kind of fuse together with his already existing abilities, I just feel like it'd be very interesting to see. But yeah, let me not hide it, I do just want the parallel between Shigaraki and the rabbit from Umagodoki Zoo, however it's pronounced. I think I pronounced that right. The third quirk I believe Shigaraki should have stolen from its user is, of course, gonna be Overhaul. Now this just baffles me, right? I mean, All for One 100% had the ability to steal this quirk during the prison break a couple arcs ago in My Hero Academia, and I don't believe he did, right? He just doesn't, as far as we know. So it's very odd that this amazing quirk that would definitely be very, very powerful to use, you can fuse with other people, you can do all sorts of crazy stuff, isn't taken by All for One. But I definitely think it should have been something that Shigaraki had access to, and if Overhaul shows up at any point on his battlefield, I would love to see like the justice of like, oh, you're back? Last time I took your arms and I kind of like sealed your quirk away. Now I'm going to take your quirk. You know what I mean? Now I'm actually going to take the quirk. And there's a couple reasons why I think it'd be very useful for Shigaraki to have Overhaul. We don't really have to have him use it for healing necessarily because he already has regeneration. I guess you could use it for like very extreme cases where it's like, oh, regeneration isn't gonna cut it here. I have to regenerate and use Overhaul at the same time, and that would probably maybe give him an even more broken kind of healing factor or kind of healing ability in a quick burst. But I think one of the more useful abilities for Overhaul with Shigaraki is we know that his big thing is he's going to touch the ground and he's going to decay things, right? And decay is going to spread and whatnot. But we've seen in this situation with the UA base that the heroes actually have anti-decay technology, right? So I think to counteract that, being able to turn the actual ground and plates and everything like that on UA or in UA into other things like spikes and various things like that would actually kind of like warp the ground itself in a way that would maybe dismantle some of those UA kind of defense systems that they have in place. And I feel like with Shigaraki's twisted mind, I mean, Overhaul was very cut and dry. Yeah, he was like a sick guy, but he was very like, he was a doctor at the end of the day, right? So he had a very kind of strict way of thinking, whereas Shigaraki is kind of just like an uncaged feral animal at this point, right? You give him any sort of quirk that allows him to create things, and he's going to create some pretty sick stuff, to be honest, like sick and grotesque and gross. So I honestly wonder if he wouldn't be fusing people together and doing all sorts of like nut stuff, or like taking the giant pieces of like fingers and faces and stuff and doing stuff like that with Overhaul. I just feel like he would be doing some really, really grotesque stuff, like bordering on body horror all around, kind of like what we've seen with the quirk that All for One did on Nana, or used in the area around Nana, where things just had like flesh and all that stuff. I do wonder if that's what Shigaraki would be on. And again, I feel like it just presents him with another long-range tool to add to his kit, and another thing that he can do besides decaying the ground, right? Because right now when Shigaraki touches the ground, everyone knows exactly what he's doing, to the point where it kind of makes it obvious that they have to come up with a counter for that exact situation. But if he touches the ground and changes everything to, I don't know, spikes, or maybe combines Overhaul with another quirk, and that's really where the danger is in this video. Any of these quirks can be combined with other quirks within All for One. So imagine how he could use that with Overhaul, or even maybe fuse his personalities together, or change his body and make adjustments and patch notes during a battle using Overhaul. It would be pretty damn nuts. The fourth quirk that I think Shigaraki should steal from its user is gonna be Wave Motion. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, I know we've seen Shigaraki use a lot of quirks and All for One use a lot of quirks, but they don't really have a lot of long-range sort of beam-like abilities, right? That's another issue of Deku's kit that I think is going to be solved sooner or later, but I don't believe that Shigaraki has any sort of like beam. He has like air blast, he has various things that he can do, but not a sort of piercing long-range attack, right? And I think taking Nejire's Wave Motion would definitely be the answer to that. He would have access to using her long-range, high-powered beams. We know that with his quirk and all the things that he could do, he could definitely like empower the quirk and make it even stronger. And we know that Nejire uses her beams coming from her arms or her hands or different places on her body, and we've also seen Tamaki use it that way, but he made a giant grotesque cannon using his arm and some of Nejire's energy to send a giant Kamehameha wave at Shigaraki. So I feel like partially it's based on like the container that it's contained in, right? Like if Tamaki makes a giant grotesque arm out of 100 animal parts and makes a cannon out of it, then it's going to shoot like a cannon, right? But what could Shigaraki do now that he can effectively just grow his body at will in various grotesque ways? Could he make like a giant, and I mean giant by the way, cannon that would pretty much just erase the heroes, right? Like could he do that if he had Nejuri's quirk? I wonder. And how does Shigaraki fly right now? I've never really questioned that entirely. We know that he is capable of flying because of the Star and Stripes fight, because he kind of just stood in midair. It's very, very similar to Nana's quirk, actually, right? Don't you think that's a little weird? It's how similar it is to Nana's quirk. Maybe it's just a different flying quirk altogether. I think All For One also showed the ability to pretty much just stand in the air and fly, both right now in the War Arc and Kamino, but that just kind of made me wonder if they both have Nana's quirk in there. Kind of a little bit of a sidebar, but yeah, that kind of made me wonder for a second. So keeping it with the big three, we're gonna go to the next person, and we all know what I'm gonna say. I'm not gonna say Manifest, obviously. I'm gonna say Permeation. Now, this has to be on this list, right? We really don't even have to talk about this one that long, because if I didn't include this one on the list, my entire comment section would be filled with people saying, how could you not include Permeation, right? Because we know that Shigaraki's main weakness is that he can be hit, he can be hurt. Even though he can regenerate, you know, he can still be stopped from doing what he has to do. But if Shigaraki had Permeation, I mean, yeah, it's not immediately as broken as it seems because he'd have to learn how to use it, but I believe that All For One to a certain extent gives you information on how to use the quirks that you have, right? Like Shigaraki with no training was given access to a massive library of quirks and was using them pretty effectively. Now, he wasn't using them as massively as All For One was, like we saw when All For One took over and started using the Radio Waves quirk to start doing way more advanced stuff, but at the very least, he gets the general gist of how a quirk is used, right? So I wonder if he would have a little bit of a less hard time kind of learning how to use Permeation, but let's say Shigaraki stole Permeation and then had enough time to learn how to use it. He could just effectively walk up to you and steal your quirk, and there's nothing you can do about it. Can't stop him, you can't do anything unless you're literally Aizawa. You literally can't do anything to keep him from, you just walk up slowly. It's another one of those quirks where he could just walk up slowly to you and just take your quirk. You have no recourse, you have nothing you can do back. All you can do is be like, damn, wow, he really about to do me like this. That's crazy. So for that reason, I definitely think Shigaraki should have Permeation. You can even add the fact that when you're a proficient Permeation user, you can pretty much go into the ground and teleport around and do various like exploits because the quirk is very, very strange. So I definitely think it's a very, very useful quirk for Shigaraki to have, and I'm sure most of you will agree, right? Because what is Deku doing to Shigaraki if Shigaraki has Permeation? He's just gonna lose. The next quirk that I think Shigaraki should steal from its user is gonna be Earth Flow, and we know that Earth Flow is a quirk we saw in the Forest Training Camp. That was a quirk that allowed one of the Pussycat dolls to pretty much earthbend, more or less, right? I mean, they created mudslides, landslides, they could use the earth to create weird constructs and animals that looked very, very strange, unlike anything else designed in My Hero Academia, right? Like some sort of strange mud monster. And I mean, overall, it's a very, very useful quirk. And again, it kind of goes into that camp of quirks that I feel like would be useful because Shigaraki touches the ground and everyone knows he's going to do decay. But what if he had another option, right? Instead of doing that, and what if he can combine decay with this, right? Like send mud animals at you or mud creatures, because Lord knows the kind of creatures that Shigaraki would make if he can make literally like pseudo living beings, puppets that he could puppeteer and then have them do various things. I'm sure he would make like flying ones, all sorts of creepy, like, I don't even want to think about it. Imagine if he could place decay or various other quirks or explosives in those creatures, right? And then send them at his enemies. It would kind of make him like a weird Earth Datara, right? Even though I guess Datara style was Earth style. But being able to create massive landslides and then just decaying the entire landslide of everyone buried inside of it, I mean, this quirk kind of sells itself for Shigaraki and anyone else, right, that has quirks that they can combine together. So I definitely feel like at the end of the day, this would be another very useful tool in Shigaraki's kit. And again, I really kind of just want to see what he would make as far as like mud puppets or earth puppets. The Pussycat doll herself makes some pretty interesting things. I'm sure Shigaraki would make an entire nightmare castle out of earth and everything, so that's something that I would really want to see. So I hope that another Pussycat doll loses their quirk to Shigaraki. I feel bad for them. And finally, what would actually be the most busted quirk on this list for Shigaraki to steal. I know people are going to be like, all for one? One for all? No. None of those quirks. It's actually way more subtle than that. It's going to be invisibility, right? Toru Hagakure's quirk, invisibility. Think about it for 2 seconds and you already understand before me even finishing the sentence why this would be the most dangerous quirk for Shigaraki to have. Imagine you just can't see him. Do I have to explain any more than that? Imagine Shigaraki Tomura, Shigaraki for one, Shigaraki mix of all for one, even Shigaraki from My Villain Academia era before that. Imagine him walking around invisible. No, that's bad times for everyone. Things are just decaying and crumbling. You have no idea why. You're talking to your friend. All of a sudden, you feel like he's kind of not really there, and then you see him crumble away, and you have no idea what's going on. Then something grabs you from your chest. You see nothing there. What's happening? And you're gone. It's horrifying. It's definitely horror fuel. I would never want to see this quirk in Shigaraki's hands. Keep Toru far away from Shigaraki, right? Because all the stuff that they're doing is only because they can actually see Shigaraki, right? No one has a search quirk they could use on him. That's the other thing. He could hunt you down. He could be the invisible hunter who hunts you down, steals quirks, and then I guess if he had control of it properly, he could just turn off the quirk and be visible suddenly and go boom. So those are the quirks that I feel like would be most useful for Shigaraki to steal from their users, or at least the quirks that I want to see the most. So let me know if you guys want to see another list like this for maybe all for one, or I don't know. I don't really think I could do another one of these, but it was fun while it lasted. This is Pineapple. I'll see you guys later. Peace.